I'm going to give it another minute and then I've got some programmatic announcements and then we'll get started with Erin. Well, I'll get started with the announcements. Um, so we have found a location for the 2026 symposium. So we're going to be gathering in San Diego uh, at the Mission, oh gosh, Mission Beach Conference Center. It's on our website, so you'll be able to find it there. And then it is April 29th through May 1st. So we are going to be opening registration next month, but what is open this month is the call for proposals. So if you are, and thank you, Sarah, for submitting yours. Great work. So if you're thinking of coming and thinking of presenting, now is the time to submit your proposal. We also have our mentorship program is open, and we've got let's see. Lisa is on the phone. She's going to be one of our mentors. And so we've got 10 mentors have applied. It's the most we've ever had. So we're grateful for that opportunity and for those who are willing to share their expertise with others. So if there are people in your organization that you think would benefit from having a mentor, this is the year to have them join because we've got such an incredible cohort of people. So the deadline for registering for to get a mentor is November the 15th. We will not be having the coffee chats in November due to the holidays, but we're coming back for our holiday coffee chat, and that's Thursday, December 11th. And we've got two participants, two gleaners, Brandis from Tikkun Ha'ir in Wisconsin, and Catherine McDonald from Ruth's Gleaning in South Carolina. And they're going to share how they build community by holding meals together with their volunteers. So I thought, what a nice way to talk about holiday traditions with our gleaning community. And then we've also got two affinity groups happening. And so November 5th is the Volunteer Engagement Affinity Group. And November 13th is what we call the Holding It Together Affinity Group. And that is really a feminist perspective on how women are holding it together, not only as gleaners, but looking at the entire infrastructure of care and how women play a role in unpaid care that is really taking the place of any other social safety net construct. And that leads us nicely into the conversation that we're going to be having today is what is happening to our social safety net as it impacts farmers and families. And so we're very fortunate today to have Erin McKee of the Community Food Systems, the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy, joining us from Minnesota to give us a brief legislative update. And then we're going to have a chance to share what we see happening in our home communities. I reached out to Erin, gosh, it's been a couple months now. And at that time, we were still looking at pending legislation for the budget and maybe even a new farm bill. Well, here we are 2 months later, and the legislative landscape is vastly different with big announcements coming out just this morning. So Erin has been redoing her slides and redoing her slides and redoing her slides again and just trying to keep on top of it for all of us who are maybe news junkies like myself, or maybe not, and this is new information for you. So, Erin, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you so much, and thanks everyone. It's a small conversation today. I don't know if it's because folks are still scrambling at the end of a very busy harvest season, or who wants to really talk about this is a little scary. So, not sure about that, but I'm grateful to all of us who are here on the call today. So, over to you, Erin.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. And thanks to the group for having me today. Yeah, I'm excited to connect with all of you. And as Kathy said, I am really looking forward to hearing from you about what you're seeing on the ground as well. Because there's so much going on. And I think one of the biggest questions that I get is like, what does this actually mean for impact? And are you hearing from people, are you hearing from farmers? Are you hearing from community members about how this is actually playing out for people and communities on the ground? And I would love to hear what all of you have to say about that. So I think you can see my slides here. I will just share a little bit about our organization. Since I haven't joined this group before, I'll let you know a little bit about my background. So my name is Erin. I am the Community Food Systems Program Director at the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy. It's a really wonky, long name. But we are a nonprofit organization. We're based in Minneapolis, Minnesota, but we do have an office in DC, and we also have an office in Europe as well. And we work on farm and food systems issues, all the way from the big picture international trade agreements to federal policy issues. And then my program, the Community Food Systems Program, does a lot of work at the state level. But I think what's unique about ITP is we're kind of looking at the interplay between those different levels and seeing how what's happening at the international or federal level impacts what we can do here in our community at the state level or regionally. And it's an important perspective to have right now with so much upheaval going on, just recognizing that what's happening nationally is going to have an impact on our farmers in our state. And then we do also do a lot of when we're working on community food system stuff in Minnesota, it is with an eye towards the bigger picture system that we're in. So I will say, like, I've done a lot of farm to school and farm to early care work. So connecting farmers with schools or early cares as potential customers, and then working directly with the schools. Or I've done a lot of work with Head Starts to figure out, like, how can I buy from my local farms? And then we've done a lot of research and evaluation, looking at the lay of the land and what are the challenges that farmers or schools are facing, even when they want to do these programs. And then what are the opportunities, like different policy asks that we can make to help these programs happen more easily. We have done a lot of resource creation. So whenever we work with one program doing implementation stuff, we're drawing lessons for the system as a whole, and then we publish those resources publicly to help other people. And we publish the results of our research. And then we've done advocacy. So I'm the campaign lead, a co-lead for the Farm to School and Early Care Policy in Minnesota at the state level. And we successfully passed legislation to create a grant to support farm to school and early care in Minnesota. And then I also co-founded and am the lead coordinator for the Mini Ag Network, which is a network of farm and food systems organizations in Minnesota working on state level policy in lots of different areas, but trying to work together and collaborate, share information, build our network to be able to build a better food system for our state. So that's just a little bit of background about where I'm coming from. And So as I said, my expertise is probably like highly in the state level, but we are always thinking about the federal level and the international negotiations and how those influence what we can do at the state. So I am going to share just a little bit about relevant programs at the federal level that have an influence on our local food systems. And then I would love to have a discussion with you and hear more from you. And actually, if you wouldn't mind sharing your names and where you're coming from, in the chat, that would be awesome. Just so I have an idea of who's in the room. Maybe you could share your name and your role and your location. Um, and then I will just share some groups that I know. If you want to get involved in like engaged in this work, I can share a couple of recommendations of groups to follow, but I'm sure all of you might have good ideas too, so you could share those with the rest of the group as well. Um, so that's the lay of the land, and I hope to have it be a discussion and not just me presenting for too long here. But I will share first one story that I wonder if you all may have heard. Kathy told me that this group is really closely following and is interested in nutrition access. And maybe you heard about some of the cancellations of some federal programs that had to do with nutrition access. And I'm going to share a link in the chat to a write-up about this just because I don't want to get way too in the weeds. But we do have we had a program that was created as a kind of post-pandemic program, but that really was something that advocates had been asking for a long time, where there was a direct infusion of funding from the federal level into programs that could help them. It was for schools and also for food shelves and hunger relief programs to purchase from their local farms and get that fresh local food to their community members. It was really a win-win-win program. And they had done a first round of it post-COVID. I know my experience in Minnesota, we had a federal grant that was an infusion of federal money that supported these institutions to buy from their local farms, and it was hugely successful. And they had a plan, and in fact, in Minnesota and other states, there were signed cooperative agreements for another round of funding. It was going to be much larger than the first round. They had announced USDA was going to distribute $1 billion in funding nationally to support local food purchasing programs. And for Minnesota, that meant $17.9 million over 3 years coming in. It was like 5 times more than the first round of funding. It was really a landmark investment in our local food system, and it would have been a game changer for our state. We were really excited. We were making plans to support this huge growth in local purchasing for schools, early cares, and food shelves. But even though we had that signed cooperative agreement for the funding, it was back in the spring. I think it might have been in February that they abruptly they announced that this funding had been canceled. And it was really a devastating decision for our farmers, our kids, and our communities who would have all benefited from this support. So we were really, really disappointed. It's a little hard to quantify exactly what the impact of that decision was because it was planned funding. It hadn't yet started to come in. So it's not like there was a farm that had already made a deal to make a sale and then that deal was canceled. But we know the great positive impact that that first round of funding, which was way smaller, had had. So we can just project forward to what it would have been. And if you want to get into the details, you can read the blog post there that we did. But that was a really big disappointment that happened right in the beginning of the year here. And it represented something like it was such a cool program. It's not controversial. It's like bipartisan and it is a win-win-win. There's no, there wasn't a bad way to spin this program. So it's a little confusing, especially with the administration's kind of verbiage about wanting to make America healthy again and things like that, that, we do need to support our farmers if we want to have a healthy food system. So that's just something I wanted to make sure you're all aware of, because I will say they also had a much smaller grant, the Farm to School grant. It's the Patrick Leahy Farm to School grant that comes from USDA. And last year's round of that funding was canceled, and that was really disappointing too. But they did bring that one back. They kind of reworked it, and it's open for applications now. And so there is some hope that maybe they would bring back this local food purchase assistance program in a different form, and that food shelves and schools and early cares would have access to that support, and farmers, because the money that goes to this program directly goes towards purchases from farmers. So it infuses into the farmers and their communities, which is really, really great. Oh, I have in my slide, it was March 2025 that happened. My sense of time in this year has gotten a little fuzzy, but and then I did want to highlight, probably you're familiar with the Farm Bill. It is a very large and complicated piece of legislation. Theoretically, the idea with this package of legislation is that they pass a new Farm Bill every 5 years, is the intention. And it encompasses, it's really the nation's most important farm, food, nutrition, and rural economy funding program. And it sets the direction for the country's food system from farm to fork, really. It has a tremendous impact on farmers' livelihoods, on our access to food and support for sustainable farming and conservation efforts. And it impacts everybody. So it is a very comprehensive package. You can see here a pie chart showing the different types of funding. I will just note there's a section there on crop insurance, and I just will say that is directed more towards commodity crops. There isn't as much funding towards food producing farms. So that's just something to know. There's actually not that much funding that's going towards food producing farms in the Farm Bill compared to commodity crop growers, for example. And of course, you can see that the big ticket item is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP. And one thing that's important to kind of know is that this model of the Farm Bill, combining both the commodity and crop insurance funding together with the nutrition assistance funding, historically, by having those combined in one package of legislation, it meant that legislators coming from different perspectives would negotiate with each other to get it across the finish line. And it kind of, it's not we would not say this is a perfect system, but it made it possible for legislators with really different priorities to negotiate with each other to be able to make a deal and get this funded. So our current Farm Bill is expired. The 2018 Farm Bill, they've been trying to get it passed. Here, I'm gonna keep posting some links if you really want to dive in. They've been trying to negotiate a new Farm Bill, but they have not been able to get it across the finish line the last couple years. And then they keep doing a year extension at a time. And right now we don't even have that. They have seemed to kind of think like, well, we'll figure it out by the end of the year. And then when they do it, it's just kind of extending the status quo of what the previous 2018 Farm Bill was like without doing the real work of negotiating to make a new deal. Um, but it is not it feels like, as a group that has been watching this pretty closely, it doesn't seem like it's moving anywhere. It has not moved forward, and they kind of every year it comes up again, and they kind of some people are kind of hopeful that it might happen, but it recently has not. So I'm also going to share, if you want to really dig into the Farm Bill too, for that mini egg network that I mentioned, we have a little page that's kind of an orientation to the Farm Bill too. And I think it's kind of helpful because it can be, there are different titles, it covers so many different issue areas that you can dig in there. But an important thing um, that this, let me see here, related to the Farm Bill. Um, so you all have probably heard that in the summer, they passed a budget reconciliation bill. The administration titled it the Big Beautiful Bill. And it's an irregular, it used to be very unusual for administrations to pass reconciliation bills this way. They usually were kind of simple and they didn't encompass all these other issues, but in the past few administrations, as Congress has had more difficulty negotiating and actually getting things passed, they have used reconciliation to pass more and more things because they haven't been able to get them done through the other more traditional negotiation processes like we had for the Farm Bill. When they passed the reconciliation bill this summer, they included a lot of things around SNAP, like making work requirements. And because they did these things that historically have been included in the Farm Bill, this makes it exponentially even more difficult for them to negotiate about the Farm Bill because those issues have kind of been taken off the table. And so now there is some talk about maybe doing a skinny Farm Bill that would handle the issues that are left over, but it doesn't, a lot of people are skeptical that they would even do that. And what kind of seems like it would happen is they'll just do a 1-year extension again that would cover the issues like conservation funding that have been not covered in reconciliation, but would usually have been covered in the Farm Bill. But as you can see here, um, the, and I will also share another link about the reconciliation. Sorry, this one, the formatting of it is really long. Oh, that's because it's two different links. Okay, there are two different links there. One is to one of our blogs at IATP, and one is to a news story there. But we are critical of a lot of the things that were included in the reconciliation bill. So one is what I just said, like that because it breaks up the Farm Bill structure, it really makes it hard to move forward with any kind of negotiation otherwise. And then just the content itself, particularly the cuts to SNAP and the increased hunger that this will lead to, are really devastating. And then where it does increase funding, it appears to be paying for tax cuts to those who are already wealthy. So we have some criticisms of the way that this is modeled. The other thing is that it also uses the cuts from SNAP to increase farm subsidies and insurance payments that are directed towards commodity growers, not towards food growing farms. And it really is focused on benefits to the really large producers and not the small to mid-scale farms. Um, and oops, sorry, it really reinforces the crop insurance system that we have that is not working for small scale farms. Um, the other thing that I wanted to, oh, this has a little bit of a little bit of animation. Um, the other thing I wanted to bring up, so two kind of large scale issues that are having a big impact on our local farm and food systems. Um, the tariffs and trade deals. We have other staff people at IATP who work on this more exclusively than I do, but with the uncertainty around what's going to happen, are they going to put tariffs on different items or not? It makes it very difficult for farmers to plan ahead. And this has been a big impact. It's had a big impact on farmers who depend on exports, of course, like especially I know our soybean growers are very concerned because they don't know if they'll be able to sell their product. I've heard of some of them just plowing their product under because they don't have a place to sell it. For food producing farms, it's a little different because it's a lot of those fresh products get sold locally, but they do still have a lot of input costs, like things like fertilizer or equipment, or just little things that you might not think of, like the packaging that they need to be able to deliver their product. Um, then those different things have a higher input cost because of the tariffs as well. So we're still, I will just say, like, one thing that's kind of hard in making this presentation, as I said, is like many people want to know what is the impact on farmers, and it's kind of rolling out slowly. And I'm hearing anecdotal stories of farmers who are saying, like, I don't have a market for this, I don't know what's going to happen. But just the uncertainty itself has an impact even before knowing that the cost is higher for a certain item. I will share another blog post in case you want to dive into the details on that. And then I know this is an issue that you all have really probably a much more direct experience with than I do. But looking at the impact on the labor market with the crackdown on immigration, and we depend on a lot of immigrant community members in our farm and food system all along the supply chain for harvesting and for processing. And I am hearing that it's very difficult. Like farmers already were struggling with getting enough workers to be able to harvest everything. And this situation has only made it worse. So we are very concerned. About human rights violations, I would say, first and foremost, but then there are, um, there are demonstrable effects on like farmers being able to harvest their product and potentially even higher prices when we were already facing inflation, with our food prices as well. Um, and I do think Kathy had mentioned to me that she's heard anecdotally from all of you about what you're seeing in your state. So I would love to hear more about that as well. And I think with that, so that is like that was a lot of information, a lot of different topics. But I would love to hear from all of you about what you're seeing in your communities and the impacts of kind of the federal uncertainty or the actual policies themselves on what you're seeing with your farmers and your nutrition access communities. Yeah, I would love to hear. Or if you also have questions, I can do my best to see if I can answer them. And maybe I'll also stop sharing for a little minute here while we discuss.
Aaron, I missed the first part of your presentation. I'm excited to go back and watch the recording of it. Question, that's a sort of a point of curiosity or get your thoughts on is, it seemed like we saw this breakup of traditional farm bill
Mm,
policies or funding stream happen, as we came out of COVID, as you saw, like, you hit the farm to food box, the food box program came out that, historically probably would have fit into a farm bill, farm to food bank pantry funding, this regional food systems partnership funding, we've came out of there as well. Um, would you say, is that sort of where we started to like pick off pieces of the farm bill, and what does that sort of impact on our larger food policy work at this moment because of those choices?
yeah, I think that's a really good question because there were standalone programs there that it would be nice to have like as a stable core part of the Farm Bill funding. Um, and like that investment in the regional food systems um was really unprecedented. Like this is something that I think it was like the pandemic made some things possible that hadn't seemed really realistic before. Um and it seemed for a second like maybe we had an opportunity to get more stable funding for those programs because they were very successful. Um, but I don't know. I mean, I do think that with the Farm Bill, it's always been a little precarious. Honestly, like every time it comes up for renegotiation, there are some people who want to cut SNAP or to separate those. There have always been people that have been trying to make those separate negotiation tracks and I would say nutrition advocates have fought really hard to say, no, we need these to be together because there's a lot of concern that if you don't tie them together with the farm policy, it would be really challenging to get them funded. So it was a kind of, I mean, it is a little bit odd, but it made it possible to do some negotiations that didn't seem like they could move forward otherwise. But I see what you're saying, like, was that setting a precedent by passing some things on a one-off basis that it could have contributed to the idea that, oh, we'll just do something separately. I feel like the real kind of um transition has been the way that the reconciliation negotiations have been normalized as like this is the only way we
Mhm,
get things done, and then
mhm,
getting the different pieces that usually should be covered in the farm bill covered by that reconciliation bill instead of keeping it where it could be like when they have passed these giant reconciliation bills that include everything, you can't get into negotiating about nutrition access. That's just like one little piece of this giant legislation. And so it's not really a democratic process at all. And it's not transparent, it's not open. Um, and it's also like it presents this giant package that no one even has the chance to read every page of. And it's like an up or down vote. It's not a democratic negotiation process. So during that whole lead up to passing reconciliation bill, we were saying these issues like SNAP should not be part of this. They should be kept where they have historically been in the Farm Bill. And like that is the proper place to have the negotiations because it is very nuanced. But I think, yeah, there's been a long path towards Congress having a challenging time passing meaningful legislation.
How have we gone, what, almost 5 years, something like, I don't even know, forever without a farm bill, like,
Mhm.
there seems to be no, like, urgency to have a farm bill again.
It's surprising. Yeah, yeah. So we have the 2018 Farm Bill right now, so we're on like year 7. And they've been the last couple years, they've passed 1-year extensions. And that was supposed to give them a year to then figure out what to do, but every time they just have been kicking the can down the road and not actually negotiating a new plan. And it does seem symptomatic of the larger dysfunction in the
Historically,
congressional.
bills lasted for 5 years, is that what I
Yeah,
remember?
that's correct. Yep.
Barbara Iceworth Barbara is one of our board members and also works extensively with refugees as
Mm.
part of the organization she works for, sent me an email this morning, and I just wanted to share what Barbara said. Um, Refugee resettlement is losing their minds as all refugees and asylees, asylum seekers never get SNAP, will be ineligible for SNAP benefits starting November 1st. If it has not already gone south, we will be facing food scarcity among nutrition and hunger focused agencies and a SNAP cliff for
Mm.
families with children. So that's coming to you from Tucson, Arizona. And so I think this is a new concern that SNAP has been effectively put on notice that there is no budget coming from the federal government, at least, beginning November 1st, unless, of course, Congress comes back into session and addresses that. So this is on top of all of the programmatic changes you've listed. Is this something that has come to the awareness of other people on this call? It seems to be relatively new. And what is, let's go around the horn and share. We've got Maine to Hawaii on this call, which is really
Wow.
what's incredible about the Association of Gleaning Organizations. And Sean, by the way, is our executive director, and he's joining us from Costa Rica.
Ah.
So
Oh.
we're international today, but I'd love to hear like Kara, Lynn, Lisa, and Sarah. What do you see happening in your communities? What's the level of awareness? How are people mobilizing to address this unique set of circumstances? Maybe we'll start in Maine and work our way across. You're up first, Lynn.
Thank you. Well, in Maine, there's a couple of things going on. First of all, our farm to school situation, we're kind of set up better than most because we started back in 2015 and we're able to get some huge grants, at least huge
Mm.
for Maine. And we took that money as soon as we got it and we banked it. So we do have some things going on with some centralized regional food processing and combined buying and regional buying for the schools. However, for SNAP, it's a whole different story. And I think this is one of the things a lot of people don't realize. SNAP is handled differently in each state.
Mm.
So there's no cohesive power behind that. And you have legislators who say, well, it's not going to affect my state that badly because, our state will take care of it. But like in a state like Maine, we don't have the budget to fill in for what we're not going to get from the feds. So as of the middle of July, all of our SNAP educators and most of the SNAP um, leadership knew they were going to be losing their jobs. They just didn't know when. They didn't know if it was going to be September, if it was going to be December. And so we've been trying to prepare as much as we can and adding on as many additional ways of getting food, doing some fundraising. But the reality is you can't use private philanthropy forever. And we shouldn't, because if we did that, we would never, ever fix this problem. We knew we could fix this problem during the pandemic. We were able to get school lunch for all kids in Maine, and we were able to keep it, which was an amazing thing. But even that, I can see down the road, if we can't afford it, they will take it away. So it's not looking good. And
Mhm.
I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but it's some of those legislators are just numb. They don't even understand what they're cutting off.
Mhm.
Kara, Pennsylvania. Oh, Western Mass, sorry.
Can you hear me okay? I'm having
Yeah.
some other things today. Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, I think we're seeing the same things that I hear other folks naming. We are not a direct service agency ourselves. We distribute to agencies that serve individual clients. And so our partner agencies have empty shelves, longer lines, and a lot of fear and concern. I would say one plus that I'm seeing is we've actually had a couple of our funding partners, whether past or present, reaching out to check in and actually asking us what we're seeing and what we might be needing. And that hasn't necessarily resulted in more funding for us yet, but I'm seeing funders paying attention and checking in with us. And that feels hopeful to me that as a team across the sector, where people are paying attention. And farmers, certainly, we have a very strong local agriculture landscape in Western Massachusetts, and many of our farmers lost farm to school markets and contracts. I'm hopeful that many of them will pick back up with the implementation, if that's the right word, and increased funding for the Patrick Leahy Farm to School grants. But we'll see how that pans out. We do have a strong Massachusetts Farm to School organization and advocacy world. So hopeful about that. Yeah, those are I think the main things.
Sarah, what are you seeing in Washington?
So there's a lot of things going on in Washington, and I'm not familiar with all of them, but there's some great legislature. There's it's not directly affected by the big beautiful bill, but there is an initiative called Use Food Well Washington, which kind of aims to help with like food waste, and in that way has also been kind of targeting some um, food rescue and help with some of the issues with SNAP cuts and stuff. But I mean, just like all of you guys, we've really seen like our food banks are overstressed. I mean, there's one right down the street from my house, and like every time I drive past it, it's just like this line of cars that just looks to me like an hour's long kind of wait. And that's not like unusual. We have the SNAP cuts, and just like you were saying, Lynn, about having realization that that's going to be happening for months. I mean, I've been talking to people who back in, gosh, was it May or June? It was earlier in the year where folks are talking about, yeah, they're going to be cutting the SNAP ed jobs, and we think we might go through September. There might be something else. And that's just like gone away. I mean, I think there's a lot of work being done to figure out how we can support that in this state. But it's all just kind of new, and I think we're all kind of figuring it out on the same page as everyone else.
So I'm also Pacific Northwest. I'm here in Oregon, and to add to what Sarah was saying, labor issues are really hitting on the West Coast because,
Mhm.
as you know, we've seen on the news, ICE is really taking action on a lot of West Coast states. So traditionally, we've had a labor force that starts in California and then with the harvest there, and then moves north into Oregon and Washington, and then ends up the harvest year in Idaho with potatoes. And so this year, a lot of farmers in Oregon and Washington are saying even their workers with documentation, whether that be a green card or an H-2B agriculture visa, we're not making the trip from California because of heavy ice activity on the I-5 corridor, which is our main north-south corridor going from California up into the Pacific Northwest. And so we've got um, and team that with a bumper crop. I mean, this year, like corn, pears, and apples were off the hook here. We had a urgent call from Gorge Gleaners into Portland to come and get tons and literal tons of pears and corn earlier this harvest season, and now with apples. So with teaming a bumper crop year after years of drought, we've had some really good weather and lack of fires, thank goodness. But we don't have the labor to harvest, and that's a shame. That's a man-made disaster there. And like some of you have pointed out, we've got wheat and soybeans in the eastern part of our states. So in the west, we've got a lot of small growers and produce, but in the east, it's more commercial farming and ranching. And the wheat farmers and soybean farmers are experiencing what everyone else is experiencing, that loss of the primary markets in Asia. Apples also get exported to Asia, and so the tariffs are, a double whammy on top of a labor shortage.
Mhm.
I also distribute from our local gleaning organization to the food pantry here. So I'm at the food pantry at least every week, and we're seeing doubling of the population seeking food. And this is even before full implementation of not only cuts to SNAP, but work requirements. And
Mhm.
those work requirements are very will result in people not receiving benefits, not because they're not working. There's a lot of information about how many folks receiving SNAP are actually working, but because of the need to document that, the need to document it. So many folks are gig employees or providing care work or otherwise would qualify, but very difficult to document. And not only SNAP, that's going to impact Medicaid. And
Mhm.
so that I think will have significant consequences for our communities.
Mhm.
So
And for
that's
rural
yeah,
hospitals that depend on those
right,
payments, and yep.
right. We're seeing rural hospitals in Eastern Oregon and health clinics already closing. So
Mm.
Lisa, what's the outlook in Hawaii?
Not much better than everywhere else. Um, so Whole Core Harvest is a program of a food bank, and we're the only food bank on the island. We're on the we're on Hawaii Island. Um, and I was in a meeting with my supervisor, who's our executive director, yesterday, and she was saying that they're anticipating the shutdown and particularly the stopping of SNAP benefits to be worse than COVID.
Mm.
And in COVID, we were serving 80,000 people a month. And that's out of only 200,000 people who live on the island. Yeah, it's just getting really, really scary. We purchased $100,000 worth of food this week, which is, I don't know the exact percentage, but it's a significant increase from our regular purchases. And we don't really have the ability to sort of maintain that level of purchasing. And our executive director right now is trying to work with the state to try and get them to help cover some of that cost, because the food banks on all of the islands, and there's typically just one on each island. You know, we're drowning. It's really hard to help. And tomorrow we're doing what we call Ohana drops, which is like a grocery bag drop, where we go to sort of a main location and people come, and we're doing one just for federal workers. And Hawaii is only second to Washington, D.C. in terms of the number of federal workers that we have. And so we're anticipating, I think my executive director said 500 cars or 600 cars. And you typically times that by 4 to estimate the number of people that are being served. And that's just federal workers, that one.
Thank you all for sharing. There was a question in the chat. It looks like, Erin, you're addressing that.
Yeah, I can address it verbally because it's complicated. So we were just chatting about the different USDA programs that can support farm to school, and which ones were canceled and which ones are back on again. So the local food purchase, or the local food for schools program, and the local food purchase assistance program, which was going towards food shelves, were canceled abruptly. That was the one that I had mentioned was canceled in March, and that was a huge planned infusion of funding. And that has not been reinstated. And one thing to know that's different about that program was that that money went directly to the schools or food shelves to buy food from local farms. And that's important because a lot of times that's what was cited as the barrier for these institutions, is like, well, local food is a little more expensive. We just don't have the budget to buy that. And so this was directly addressing that barrier, and the money was going through the schools and food shelves directly to farmers. The USDA Patrick Leahy Farm to School grant program was canceled the last cycle of it was canceled. So they had accepted applications and stuff. We had applied, and then they were like, actually, we're not doing that whole round. We're just not doing it this year. But they reworked it, and it's open for applications again right now, but with changes to how it's run. So it's great that they're doing that program because it's really important. It's an important stream of funding. However, it's not as much funding as was in the local food for schools and local food purchase assistance program. And this funding, the Farm to School grant program, supports like planning grants or creating resources or doing the work around the local purchases, but it's not giving schools the money for food. So they were very good complements to each other, but this being back does not mean that, oh, it's fine, we got that funding back at all. And it was a landmark thing that we finally had a program that was directly investing, instead of just doing the supportive stuff to encourage schools and food shelves to buy from their local farms. This was actually help, like giving them the money that could only be used to buy from farms. So it was a direct infusion of funding to the local farm and food system, if that makes sense. And it's super complicated. I do recommend, if you're interested, that blog post that I shared, because it kind of gets way in the weeds if you're like wanting to dig in.
Which article is that? I am curious actually to dig in and make sure that I'm speaking about it like accurately when it comes up.
Yes, let me grab the link to that again. Let me see.
Erin, if you could send me these links in an email, I can
Mhm.
also distribute that. That would be helpful.
Yep. Okay, I was in the middle
Chat
of
will
writing a
also
long
directly
thing.
save to Zoom, Kathy.
What's that?
The chat will directly save to Zoom as well
Oh,
if you just
okay.
want to.
Okay.
Yeah, so this article tries to kind of articulate some of those distinctions, and it's way in the weeds, and people shouldn't have to navigate all of that to know what's going on, but it is kind of complicated. But the money that was canceled was $1 billion. I mean, this was like another level of money that would have been really great. I really appreciate hearing from all of you about what's happening in your states. And it's really cool to have all the different perspectives from different states, and sad and unfortunate that it seems like it's not looking great no matter where you are. So I'm sorry that you're all dealing with that stress. And especially one thing that I was thinking about as you were all talking is my food shelf friends were already saying because of post-COVID, there was a cliff there when those funds ran out. And then because of inflation making food prices go up, they had already been telling me that their demand was like triple what it used to be. So I'm just very scared about the demand and the difficulty. I just don't know how we can meet that. And we have an action alert at our state level right now that because the USDA has issued notices that because of the shutdown, which I guess I didn't even touch on just the shutdown itself as a separate topic, but SNAP benefits for November may not be issued. That's even different from the cuts.
Right.
It's like authorized money that can't be paid out because of the shutdown. And so in Minnesota, that would be 500,000 people losing access to $70 million in grocery benefits for feeding families and supporting our local economies. If the shutdown continues. So there's like a whole, sign-on letter circulating, but people don't really know what we can do. Although, okay, I had told Kathy I didn't want to end on the saddest note because I anticipated that this might be a little bit of a bleak conversation. So I did, just as we're wrapping up here, I wanted to share a couple of organizations that I recommend if you want to engage in federal policy issues. And I think for this group especially, maybe you already are aware, the Food Research and Action Center, FRAC, they do a ton of stuff on SNAP and hunger, nutrition assistance, and they will do action alerts about the most, relevant things and timely things. And especially as everything is changing so much, I can give you the recommendation to follow them rather than a specific action alert right now. And then on the farmy side of things, a kind of similar organization is the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition. So they, again, are kind of following what's happening and they issue the action alerts. And then if you care about farm to school specifically, the National Farm to School Network is another organization to follow. And then if any of you have recommendations of other national orgs to follow for engagement, I would love to hear that too. But otherwise, that's all I had today.
Erin, thank you so much for delving into all of these topics that are top of mind and your knowledgeable presentation. Very much appreciated. And thanks everyone from joining Coast to Coast. That was kind of exciting. Maine to Hawaii. That's what makes us special. Thank you
Very
so
cool.
much.
Yes. And I will just say, I hope this doesn't leave you um, feeling downhearted afterwards. I'm uplifted to see all of you here on this call and to know that we're all working on this. There's so many communities working on this across the country, and that there is solidarity, and that we're not alone. So I do take a lot of heart from that, and I appreciate the invitation to connect with you all, and I hope we can stay in touch.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, and we'll see everyone soon.
Mm.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.